Hi thinkers, welcome to the Android development playlist on ThinkX Academy. In this tutorial we are going to study a very important topic which is about activities and the states of the activities. We will also discuss the activity lifecycle and other important topics that are necessary to understand how the states of the activities are maintained and what can we do when the state of some activity changes, right? So if you're a beginner and you don't have no idea about what this activity is, which is the main activity, and so basically we are going to discuss all the important things from the scratch. So the first step is we are going to go on the browser, and there is a link which is the developer.android.com, and it shows the activity lifecycle documents. So basically first I will give you an overview. We are only going to study very simple and the concise parts of this life cycle, which is this diagram we will understand, and then we are also going to implement it inside of the Android Studio to understand what exactly in an activity, right? So the first question is what exactly is an activity, and basically I'm going to take an example. Now let's suppose we have a website. Let's say we have facebook.com. so if I go on facebook.com, we are greeted with this home page of this website. Right now if I log in with if I have this website www.facebook.com and I open this URL in any other browser, it is going to show me this page. Now this page is the home page of this website. Now if you want a similar thing, right, if you want that whenever your Android app is launched you want some home screen to show up, we are going to we are going to assign it as a main activity, which is here. So the question is, just by using the name main activity, you can see this is essentially a class. So just by assigning the main activity, will it become the main screen to come up when we are going to implement this app, right? So the answer is no, because we will have to configure it in a way that whenever the Android app is launched, main activity is going to be the first activity that launches, right? So how can we configure that, right? First of all, I've already told you there is an Android manifest file. This is an XML file. It is inside of our main directory, right? So we will open this file, and I've already told you in the previous tutorials that whenever we want to configure an activity, we are going to configure it here, right? You can see there is an activity tag, and this is the Android name, which is the name of the class, or you can say the activity, and you can see we have the name as .main activity. Now if I want to create another activity here, right, I can do it, and when I'm typing activity, you can see it already shows me some results here. So I'm going to double click on this, and it will automatically do a lot of things here. And here I can define a new class. Let's say we want to create another activity which is by the name first activity. So we can do this here. First of all, we will have to tell the inside of the Android manifest, we will have to configure that the activity is here. Right now, since we have not created any activity with the name first activity, it is going to show us an error. If you hover your mouse on this first activity, it is going to show you a recommendation which is create class first activity, right? So if you click on it, it will create a first activity, and basically we will discuss this later on. Now here you can see that in this main activity configuration we have an intent filter. Now this is the actual part where the Android app knows that it is going to open this main activity as the first screen, right? Just like we here you can see, just like the web page here is the index page or the home page, we can configure the Android app main activity by using the intent filter, We are going to discuss about intents because this is an advanced topic. We are going to discuss it later, but at this point you can understand that this part of the Android manifest.xml is going to show that this is the main activity, right? So you can see it says the action, that this is the intent.action.main, and you can also see that the category is launcher, right? So it is going to launch the main activity as soon as your Android app is going to launch. Now you can see here, this is the home page. It is the first page that you see, which is the home page. Now let's say here we have forgotten password link, right? So if I click on this link, you can see that it loads another web page, right? So this web page, is this opening in a new browser? Is this some separate website? Well, the answer is no. This is the same website, www.facebook.com. It is just that we have some other file here, which could be something like PHP file or HTML file, which displays the content here. Now we want a similar functionality inside of the Android app also. So let's say inside of Android app, right here, inside of the XML part, let's say I want to create a button which will open a second screen. You have already seen this in a lot of applications inside of your Android phone, right? You have seen that inside of the apps there are some buttons. If you click on them, they open a second screen. Now that second screen is not a separate application, that is a separate activity, right? So activity, in simple words, it is a single screen which shows some content, right? So if we want to show different content, we need different screens. We are going to define different activities. Now here you can see we have the main activity here, and here we have the configuration, which is the activity main.xml, which shows the design part of this main activity. Now we are going to discuss a lot of things about this activity. The first thing is that this is a public class main activity, and here we have the package name. And if I expand this import part, you can see it has imported an Android X app compat activity, right? So app compat activity is basically, you can see if you hover there, you will be able to see that it is a base class for activities that use support library action bar features. So basically in the Android app there is an action bar, which we will also discuss in separate tutorials, but here you can understand that we have theme of app compat, which shows the action bar, and some other functionalities are also there. So that's why this main activity is extending the app compat activity. You can even extend it by using activity. So if I type activity here, you can see there are a bunch of suggestions. I'm going to click on activity android.app, right? So now you can see that it has imported simple activity. So now we have seen, we can see now this is an activity which is a plain activity which has no other themes or something like that, and we are extending the activity, right? So in order to define an activity, so we first create a class and we extend it with the activity, right? So if I press and hold the control button, right, you will have to hold the control button, and now if I hover my mouse onto the activity, right, okay, and if I click on it, you can see that it is actually a class activity.java which defines the activity. You can even see the documentation here. There is a very big documentation, but we are not going to waste time on this, right? So now we have defined an activity which shows a particular part of the screen, and in the Android manifest we have we are making sure that we configure this activity so that the Android app knows that these are the activities in your application, right? So here we can create more activities using the activity tag, and remember that it has to be under the application tag, right? You cannot define the activity tag outside of this application tag. Now you can see we have a function here. In this function you can see we are using the annotation override. if you do not know about annotations in Java, I have a tutorial on this annotations in Java inside of the Java playlist. So I will give the link to this in I button, which will appear here, or in the description. You can check out that, right? So basically override is an annotation. If I hover my mouse here, you can see that it is an annotation, right? Extending annotation dot annotation, and it indicates that a method is intended to override a method declaration in a super type, right? So basically override tells the this class that we are overriding this function from the activity you are extending, right? So we are extending the activity. So basically what we are doing is we are overriding the onCreate function, and it is a protected function, right? In inheritance in Java, we have studied the protected keyword. I'm not going to explain the basics of Java here, but I hope you actually know Java. Now this is the onCreate function, but what is this onCreate function and what is the saved instance state, right? We will have to discuss it, and for that we will have to go on our browser and to this documentation, understand the activity lifecycle. I will give the link to this document to this website in the description, so you can check that out. Now every activity has a particular life cycle, right? So if you create any activity, it has some life cycle, it has some states and some instances that we are going to discuss. Alright, so you can see here in the documentation, as the user navigates through, out of and back to your app, the activity instances in your app transition through different states in their life cycle, right? This is the first and the most important line, which says that the user is opening your application, and there are cases when user is switching to some other application, or he is trying to close your application. So in those cases, the activity that is opened inside of your Android app, it is going to transition through different states in that life cycle, right? So an activity will have different states, which we will discuss, and basically the reason it has different states is because of the user actions, right? So if a user closes your activity is going to switch a state such that the Android app knows that the activity is closed and now you want to do some task, right? So the activity class provides a number of callbacks that allow the activity to know that a state has changed, right? So we have this main activity. Let me just make this app compact only, right? So if I go on this onCreate function inside of this app compact activity, you can see we have the onCreate function here. All right, you can see this is the onCreate function, and basically we are trying to override this onCreate function here. So I will close it, and now you can see this is the onCreate function. Now you can see that we have these this is the first onCreate function. So it is called when your activity is created, right? So whenever an activity is created, your activity has transitioned to a state which is the onCreate. Now here you can read this documentation, but we are going to only read the important parts, right? So there are a number of callbacks, right? Callbacks are basically functions only which are called whenever the activity changes some state, right? So a number of callbacks that allow the activity to know that a state has changed, right? So when your activity is changing a state, it will call a function, right? For example, the system is creating, stopping or resuming an activity or destroying the process in which the activity resides. So if the activity resides inside of a process, if that is destroyed, or if the activity is resumed, for example, let's say when the user was trying to use your app and suddenly a phone call comes, right? So in that case your activity is resumed. So the activity class will call a callback, right, which is a function. It will automatically call a function, and then we can write some code in that function which we want to execute when when the activity is resumed, stopped, or created, right? So it is very important to understand the benefits of this activity class and all these callbacks, because it is going to happen a lot that when the user is using your Android app, basically your app activity will undergo a lot of, it will transition through a lot of different states in that life cycle. So it may happen that we want to execute some code if the activity is changing the state. We will understand that this in detail here, but first let's go to the activity lifecycle concepts, and here you can see these are some of the callbacks that the activity can call, right? So we have the onCreate function here, right? If you click on it, it will show you the onCreate function, and basically I will have to go to the top here, right? There are so many functions here, you can see, because the application will traverse through a lot of different states, right? We are here. Then we have onStart function, onResume function, onPause, onStop, onDestroy. So these are the functions which are called. You can see these are 6 callbacks whenever the activity is navigating between the states. So to understand it, we have a very simple diagram here, and we will only study this diagram, and we will be able to understand everything, right? So let me first zoom in so that you will be able to see this diagram clearly. Alright, so we have this diagram. We are going to start from the top. The activity is launched, right? Activity is launched means the the user has opened your application. Whenever an activity is launched, the activity class is going to call the onCreate function, right? So here in this main activity, this is the significance of onCreate function. Whenever this activity is called, as we know that this is the main activity, and since it is a main activity, the intent filter will open it first. So whenever this activity is created, it is automatically going to call the onCreate function, and you can see that whenever an activity is created, we want to bind the XML or the design of this main activity, which is here activity main.xml, and we are going to bind it here, right? So you can see this line here, set content view, which is an inbuilt function, right? Set content view is an inbuilt function, and in this we will provide the ID of the XML file, which is the design file, XML file, which we are going to use to tell the activity to bind this Java file or this main activity and set the content of this activity to activity main, right? So to get the ID, we can use r.layout, because layout, inside of the layout directory we have the activity main, right? And then we will write the name of the XML file. So when this main activity was created, it will automatically create the content view by adding the layout dot activity main. There is one more thing here, which is super.onCreate saved instance state. So basically every activity has some instance state, and basically here we tell the Android app that this is the super keyword. So super keyword is used to basically call the this function onCreate on the super class, and this will pass the saved instance state, which is the state of this activity, and it is going to pass to the onCreate function. And we will see the significance of this function. You can see that this is, if the activity is being reinitialized after previously being shut down, then this bundle contains the data it most recently supplied in, right? So let's say this activity is resumed, or it was stopped because of some action by the user or by the system. This function will save the instance of this activity, and then after the activity is called, it will reinitialize it, right? So that's the significance of this line, right? So we are discussing the whole thing from the scratch here, right? Now let's move on to this diagram here. Now you can see the onCreate function is called. after the onCreate function, onStart function is called. onStart means that your activity has now started. So onCreate means it is created, and now we are saying that it is started on the Android application. Now we have the onResume function also, right? So onResume means the activity was resumed from some, let's say the user was using some, switch to some other application while using your application. So it will call the this is the onResume function. So if the user again switches back to your activity or the Android application, onResume function will be called, right? As the name suggests, it is going to resume all the tasks, right? Now you can see the activity is running. Now it means that your activity is, the user is actually viewing your activity, it is running. Now what can happen at this point is another activity comes into the foreground. Foreground means it, let's say a phone call comes in, right? So the activity of the phone call is going to come into the foreground, and in that case your activity which was previously running, it will go in the onPause state, right? So the activity is changing the state to pause, and whenever we know that whenever the activity changes its state, it is going to call a function, right? So it is going to call onPause in this state. If the activity is no longer visible, which means that the system or the Android system has decided that not to keep it in the background, so let's say it destroyed the activity in some case, then the onStop function is being called. If the activity is finished or being destroyed by the system, then onDestroy is called, right? So if the activity is no longer visible, it is the onStop function. If it is completely destroyed from the Android system, we call the onDestroy, and the activity is shut down. Now let's consider this part here in the onPause function, right? So some another activity is coming into the foreground, and now let's say the phone call has ended and the user is now returning to the activity. So the user returns to the activity. So whenever user returns to the activity, onResume function is called, right? It makes sense now. And here in the onStop function, you can see that if user navigates to the activity, so the activity is stopped, but now something happens and the user is again navigating to the activity, then it is going to call the onRestart function. And after calling the onRestart function, it means it is restarting the whole activity, and then it will call the onStart function, right? We have onRestart and onStart, two different functions. Now from onStop, if there is the apps with higher priority need memory, app process killed, and user navigates to the activity, again onCreate, right? So after onStop, let's say there was some memory related issues, right? Your app was taking a lot of memory, so that process, the app process will be killed, that activity will be killed, and at that point the user will navigate to the activity by calling the onCreate function, right? So basically if the app the activity was taking a lot of time and a lot of memory, the system is going to restart that activity by calling the onCreate function, right? So basically we can say that onCreate function actually tells us that the activity is now allocated inside the memory, and onStart means that it is now executing inside of the by the system, right? So we have this onCreate function. Similarly, we can override different functions, right? Let me just copy this, and here we will paste some other functions. Now instead of onCreate, we can call the onStop function, right? It is there, and inside this we do not need to send this thing, and here we are going to call super dot onStop function, which will not take this, right? Now let's say the activity is stopped, so here we can perform some actions, right? So I'm going to write here to do perform some action when the user, when app is stopped, right? So if the app is stopped, this function will be called, and when this function is called, we can perform some action here, right? Now I'm going to show you one example here, right? Let's say we have this override function. I'm going to paste it here, right? There are some other functions as well. Let's say we have onPause function, and here I'm going to write onPause again, right? Perform some action when the app is paused. Here we are going to write some other function, right? Let's say we are saying onDestroyed, right? So the activity is completely destroyed. Let's say the user removed the activity from the recent apps, right? So here we are going to say the app is destroyed. So basically this is the important thing. When the user is actually doing, when the activity is actually changing the states, we need to perform some action. And basically I'm going to give you a very simple example. Let's say that we have we are running some network service request. Let's say we are creating a GET request from some URL, and suddenly the you can say the web request was actually in some progress, let's say 60%, and after 60% some phone call came and the user is switched to some other application, which is the phone application, and now the app is in the onPause state. And now what we want is that even if the app is in the onPause state, we need to save the instance of that, we need to save the progress, right? So we can do it here. We can stop the network request because we do not want some memory leaks, right? Because if we are going to perform web request in the background, some network request in the background, it may crash the system also, right? So there are various applications, and when we will develop this e-commerce application, we will be able to understand this more, right? So let's create a toast message here, right, in the onDestroy function, right? So I will launch the application and I will remove it from the recent application, and it will call the onDestroy function. And when it will call the onDestroy function, I will show a toast message. You will understand what a toast message is. Just use the toast class, use the make text function, and here I am going to pass the name of the activity, dot this, comma, and here I am going to write that the activity is destroyed, exclamation, right? And here I am going to write dot, and here I am going to show the length long, right? So this is basically a toast message. You will understand what a toast message is, but this is the way we define a toast message. And we are going to pass it the context, which is the main activity dot this, which basically is a memory reference to this activity. Then we define the text, which is the activity dot destroyed, right? It will show a message. I will show you how it shows that. And then we pass that toast dot length long, which basically specifies you can see to show the view or text notification for a long period of time. So it will show this message for a long period of time, and dot show is basically to show this toast message. Now let's run this application. Before running this application, I also want to show you that in VCS, right, which is version control, we have the import into version control share project on GitHub. So I'm going to publish this whole project on GitHub, right, which the link I will share the link in the description below, and so that you can actually take a look at the whole codes. So I'm also going to give you some task to do yourself. So the task I'm giving you is that you need to display the toast message when the activity is paused, stopped, and let's say there is one more task, right, which is the onResume. Here I'm going to write onResume, right? So if the activity is resumed, you will have to display that the a toast message which will tell us that the activity is resumed, right? So this is your task. I'm going to give you these tasks, right? You can find this whole project inside of the GitHub link, which I will share in the description, inside of the onPause also, right? So the activity is paused, right? So you can actually play with this yourself. So now you can see it has opened the application. So if I will press home, it will call the onPause function, and now you can see it says activity is paused, right? So it means the activity is inside of our here, and it has moved to recents. Again, if you press home, it will show a toast message. This is actually a toast message which is activity is paused. Now let's say I destroy this activity, and you can see that it is displaying activity is destroyed, right? So this is a perfect example. Now what you have to do is, your task is to basically try it with onResume, onStop and other 6 callbacks, right? So that's all for this tutorial. So thanks for watching.